I can't say he came out of nowhere. I was certainly aware of him, and he earned his title shot. But the way he went about winning his title and defending it, I think, comes as a surprise because at the beginning of the year, he was not on anybody's mind about becoming a top guy. And that's
I spoke to you about this time last year, and we were kind of discussing what a bit of a dire end to the year it was in terms of the lack of, top class matches. But I think it's fair to say it's been a pretty good year for boxing. I see your little flask in the back with Tank and Garcia. Give me your fight of the year, or at least some fights that stood out to you this year, Dan.
Well, in terms of just the significance of the fights, like the big fights, we did get a lot more than I think we do in your normal year. We did get Tank against Ryan. We did get finally Terrence Crawford against Errol Spence. We did get to see Inoue go for undisputed. We didn't get it this year, but we got it signed this year, and that's Fury against Usyk. I guess it should have happened this year, but Fury was not ready to go. On the December 23rd date because of what occurred in the fight against Francis Ngannou. But there's been any number of quality matchups. We've seen David Benavidez in 2 significant fights. We've seen, Teofimo Lopez and Josh Taylor. I mean, that's like a big fight. And like, that's when you ask people about big fights, that might not be until they get to like their 4th or 5th in their mind of what was a big fight. That was a very significant fight. And some of them turned out to be kind of one-sided. I mean, I don't think anybody expected, Terrence Crawford to absolutely beat down Errol Spence or for Teofimo Lopez to just, run roughshod over Josh Taylor because they were fighting other A-level guys. And this is what happened in terms of just the pure action fights that would be in the running for, say, the fight of the year. They're maybe not the names like the ones I mentioned, but I think about, for example, and there's a bunch of good ones. You have Emmanuel Navarrete against Oscar Valdez turned into a spectacular fight. You have, a fight that I think was that, I think everybody, they missed it. Just go watch it. And that was the fight between Jaime Munguia and Sergey Derenchenko at super middleweight. I mean, you want to talk about drama, action, knockdowns, close decision, just had everything you want to see in that kind of fight. So there have been, in 2023, my view has been a beautiful combination of big mega fights that the public wanted to see, as well as gems that were on paper like, oh, that might be a good fight, and then they exceed your expectations, like I just mentioned about some of the action fights. So it's been, a really good fight. I mean, I think back also another fight that is going to be in the running for the fight of the year. And the fact of the matter is, Jonathan, is because there were so many big fights stacked up at the last couple of weeks of the year, you kind of had to wait before you make those lists. Usually you can kind of have a pretty good idea once you hit December, but there were so many important fights in the month of December. I didn't decide on, and I'll put this out in my newsletter this week, who the fighter of the year was. You had to wait to see what happened with Inoue and before you can make that call. But I was going to mention another all-time great action fight for this year, phenomenal fight, Luis Nery against Azat Hovhannissian, just a barn burner, just spectacular. And Nery, is very likely to be the next challenger for Inoue come in May, which is what they're talking about for his next fight. He's the WBC mandatory, and that's the probable fight for Inoue.
And I know you just said you'll release your fighter of the year in your newsletter, which we'll talk about in a minute. But who would you say sort of surprised you this year then, in terms of maybe a breakthrough fighter or someone you didn't expect to have such a good year?
Well, I mean, the guys that you see at the top, the Inoue, Crawford, people like that, even David Benavidez, they were guys who you knew are good and they did what they were supposed to do. But if there's somebody I would say, like a Bam Rodriguez who came back from a broken jaw and had the spectacular performance against Sonny Edwards. But the one guy that sort of would be on the list of nominees, if you will, that I can't say he came out of nowhere. I was certainly aware of him and he earned his title shot. But the way he went about winning his title and defending it, I think comes as a surprise because at the beginning of the year, he was not on anybody's mind about becoming a top guy. And that's O'Shaquie Foster, who was the number 1 contender for the WBC title at 130 pounds. And he went in the ring and he clearly defeated Ray Vargas, who was granted coming up from featherweight, but was an undefeated fighter, 30-something-0, had been around for a long time, really good fighter. And, he won that fight convincingly, won the title. And then for his first defense, he went to Mexico on enemy turf on the other promoter's card. he didn't even have a promoter at that time. He was a free agent. Matchroom had won the purse bid for his mandatory against Rocky Hernandez. They turned in another. That's another great fight that took place, and Oshaki Foster in very dramatic fashion against a solid contender who was there to win. He knocked him out in the last round in quite spectacular fashion to salvage and rescue his title. So the combination of coming from nowhere to win a title against a very respected, undefeated fighter who's still a champion in the featherweight division, and then to do what he did in the first defense. You asked who's a guy that kind of came out of nowhere or surprised you a little bit or something like that. I think Oshaki Foster definitely deserves some attention for what he did in this calendar year.
Absolutely. And just to give me a couple fights that you desperately want to see next year, fights you feel that should happen. Obviously, I think a lot of people point out to Canelo against Benavidez, things like that. But what would you say?
Well, Benavidez against Canelo certainly in the upper echelon of my list for sure. I hope that fight does happen. My faith is with Canelo because he does do things on his own terms, but thus far in his career, there isn't a fight that he hasn't taken. Maybe it hasn't been in the exact time that everybody wanted, but he fights the fights, so that's a positive sign. I think we'll see that. They're with the same company in PBC. He still has 2 fights remaining on that agreement, so hopefully that will be one of the fights. Obviously, Tyson Fury against Oleksandr Usyk. We will see that, I guess, in February, unless something crazy happens. It is signed, sealed, and delivered. Beyond that, I'm hopeful that we will see. There's still some work to be done, but I'm hopeful that we'll see Arthur Beterbiev against Dimitri Bivol. Bivol defended his light heavyweight title, in a shutout fashion on the card, the December 23rd show against Lyndon Arthur, who gave, by the way, a very great effort and came to fight, but just did not have the level of talent as Dimitri Bivol. And Beterbiev has a fight against Callum Smith coming up, which is a winnable fight for Callum Smith. But there's been so much conversation about seeing Beterbiev and Bivol for the last few years. They've been champions in that weight class for a long time. So if he beats Callum Smith, I'm hopeful that they'll make that fight. The Saudis are interested to do that matchup. That would be obviously something that would be a great fight for boxing. Also, a fight that I'm interested in. It doesn't have to be this fight, but I basically wanted to see like any combination of take like Devin Haney, Tank Davis, Ryan Garcia, Teofimo Lopez, whatever, mix and match them. And I'll be happy with any of the permutations of those kind of fights. I think one of the fights of those that we will get is probably going to be Devin Haney defending his newly acquired WBC junior welterweight title. They look so fantastic winning against Regis Prograis. There's a very likely chance that we'll see him defend it for the first time in what will be a big pay-per-view fight against Ryan Garcia. Teofimo Lopez opted not to go forward and do a fight against Ryan Garcia, that Top Rank and Golden Boy had been speaking about. But you know what? Devin Haney and Ryan Garcia is a good fight. Hopefully Tank, he'll be back and get in the mix with a big fight also. I'd love to see any of those guys mixing and matching up with each other would be welcome in my book.
Brilliant. Dan, just before I let you go, just tell everyone about how your Substack and podcast have gone this year and what you're planning on doing with it in 2024.
Well, I'm thrilled with our podcast. I do it with my partner, TJ Reeves. We do it twice a week, Thursdays into Friday, and then Sundays into Monday, where we preview and then recap, have lots of interviews and that sort of stuff. And that's seen great growth, and I'm appreciative to the fans that have been listening and giving us positive feedback. We have a really good time doing that. And the newsletter, that's been my labor of love for the last, over 2 years now on Substack, Fight Freaks Unite. And, I produce pretty much on a daily basis. And what I'm grateful for is the fact that there's so many people that enjoy it, that they're willing to go for the paid option, which is not a lot of money, but that's how you pay the bills. So I'm appreciative that they can find that easily at danrafael.substack.com. You can sign up with your email address. You can get the free material. If you're a diehard and you want to support the cause, it's $5.99 a month, not the most money in the world. And you're going to get the stuff, as I like to say, Jonathan, the news and the commentary and all that comes to you. You don't have to go finding it. It comes right to your email. You get a phone alert. So that's how I spend a lot of my time, and it's been a tremendous experience of being able to do it how I want to do it, not have to deal with editors and people that don't understand boxing and the way it should be covered.
Yeah, and I'll tell you what, it's very useful. So on the subscriber list, having that calendar of fights, literally every single one,
every Tuesday.
Yeah, exactly.
You want? I'll give that a plug, because that's honestly, when I look at the metrics, that's probably one of the most popular features, and that is every single Tuesday, the new schedule blasts out. It stays current until the next one blasts out. So you can look at your email of the schedule, And if you want to look at it, let's say 3 or 4 days later, there's been changes. I update the thing every single day. All you go is in your email, click on the headline. It will take you to the file on the website. And I'm updating that on a regular basis until the new one publishes the following Tuesday. So you can always have, it's like a rolling updated calendar constantly. And as I say in the headline, if you read it, I obsess, so you don't have to.
Don't have to, yeah. And there's fights happening this week, which I didn't even know was happening. So
world title fight, by the way, in Japan on New Year's Eve, which is their traditional date for a title fight. And by the way, this is a crazy stat. You have Kazuto Ioka defending his world title. This is going to be his 12th time fighting on New Year's Eve. How remarkable is that?
Unbelievable.
We think Canelo Alvarez and some of the great Mexican champions, have a stranglehold on their Mexican tradition dates like the Cinco de Mayo and the Mexican Independence Day in September. But many of the great Japanese fighters have the New Year's Eve fight. They have that on lockdown. Ioka being one of them. He's been doing it for many, many years. And this is actually like a lower key year because oftentimes they've got several world title fights in and around New Year's. This year you only have the Ioka fight, and then of course a few days before that on the 26th was the Inoue fight. But this is like a down year in terms of that. There's usually several more fights on multiple cards in Japan on that New Year's Eve holiday.
Absolutely. Well, that's something I'm sure some people will look at over New Year. But Dan, we will catch up. I hope next year. I hope to see you at some of the fights, and like this year, hopefully we get some big ones.
Oh, most definitely. I hope so, and I hope I'll see you at some of them.
Absolutely. Happy New Year, Dan, and I appreciate all the time this year.
You bet. Happy New Year to you and to all of your great viewers.